Good afternoon, everyone, and my name is Maureen Casey. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. Thanks to all who have joined us today for this most important conversation. I think we've all, in particular over the course of the last year, have heard lots about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, particularly after the events of last summer, but many of those have been living with this for their whole lives. And it's really important that we have these discussions. As someone said to me in a meeting that I was in this morning on this very topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, if we're really going to make meaningful change, we have to walk the walk. It needs to be more than just a conversation. But in order for us to walk the walk, we need to be educated, we need to learn, and we have to have these important conversations. Today, talking about the longstanding military policy, actually now recognizing its 10-year anniversary of change on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the fact that more than is estimated, more than 13,000 were discharged under that policy and are still struggling with the effects of all of that. It really is important for us to have these conversations, understand what the issues continue to be, and what we can do to help to change them. It seems like to those of us who are the unknowing that progress is being made. We hear about the VA secretary announcing changes in their policy, that it plans to offer gender confirmation surgeries for transgender veterans. And in another story, I saw that the Army has released its new transgender policy, yet there remains concerns about whether or not that policy will be enforced and that those who are openly serving will be protected from discrimination. And it is because of these ongoing concerns and issues that we really thought it important to create this opportunity for this conversation. Yet in so doing, I have to say that we were deeply disappointed by the negative and hateful comments we received because we decided to do this. But it is exactly for that reason that we had to do this, that whether you are someone who is currently serving, you're military connected, we are all a part of that military connected family. And if nothing else, we need to find a way to have these conversations in a respectful fashion and treat each other with respect. We need to listen, we need to learn. I know I, for one, am still listening and still learning, notwithstanding my commitment to working in this space for the last 10 years. So regardless of our own personal beliefs, it really is important if we're working in this space, if we want to continue to help those who have worn our nation's uniform, that we understand what all of their issues are. So, as I said, if we are going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, we have to walk the walk, and we're doing that here today, and I'm really excited about that opportunity. So let's get started. I am very, very pleased to be joined today. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Jennifer Dane, who's the president and CEO of the Modern Military Association of America. Jennifer is an Air Force veteran, and she served as an intelligence analyst focused on geopolitical relations, terrorism, and threat vulnerability issues. As mentioned, she currently serves as the executive director of MMAA, the nation's largest nonprofit organization working to advance fairness and equity for the LGBTQ plus military and veteran community. She currently serves as a founding board member of Partners in Promise and is a vet policy fellow. Not only is she very accomplished professionally, but so too is she in terms of her education. She has earned associate's degree, 2 master's degree, and is currently a PhD student. She also has a wide range of diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy and training experience, having worked for the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Uber, HBO Max, NBC Comcast, among others. Jennifer, really excited to have you with us today. Might you share with us a bit more about your personal story and your work with the Modern Military Association of America?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being here and hosting this. We have June as Pride Month, but Pride runs throughout the year. So just an opportunity to highlight that for sure. And some people collect things. I collect degrees. I'm a lifetime learner, so I will always be doing that. So thank you for that. But like she said, my name is Jennifer Dane, and I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Modern Military Association of America. My story starts. I'm going to go back, and it starts in 1993. And that was, for me, that was a time when the policy of don't ask, don't tell was signed into law. Even going a little bit further back in 1992, we do know that a sailor named Alan Schindler was docked in a port in Japan. And he had revealed that he was gay to his colleagues and sailors. And he was brutally murdered after they were on port by his shipmates. Why is this important? It's because he was the catalyst for Don't Ask, Don't Tell. President Bill Clinton wanted to sign into law open service for lesbian, gay, and bisexual folks. But what happened was a political compromise, and that political compromise came to be Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which essentially meant that people should not ask and you shouldn't have to tell. But like somebody else said in another webinar I was on, not all witch hunts happened in Salem. There was a lot of witch hunts that happened, and a lot of folks were basically pulled from the closet, basically incriminated, entrapment. A lot of things happened. And we know since World War II until the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, 114,000 service members were discharged as honorably or other than honorable, and still haven't got those upgrades changed. So what brings me to 1993? Jennifer Dane was a little preschooler. I never knew that a policy whenever I was a little kid in preschool would actually follow me through my lifetime. So it was signed into law in 1993. And 2010, I went to the military exam processing station in Amarillo, Texas. I remember that day pretty vividly, more so because there was this paper that was placed in front of me that said if I was found out to have any homosexual conduct, I would be discharged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. For those folks that are related to or know anything about the Uniform Code of Military Justice, it's kind of ironic that they always say punishable up to death. And that was really the case for being gay in the military. And I signed it knowing that I was lying, and that, but we shouldn't care about who somebody loves or who somebody really is. And really, we should only care about their love for nation, love for country, and dedication to the American ideals and concepts. So I signed it knowing full and well that I was lying, but it was my duty to go into to serve in the Air Force. So I did that. And in my first year of service, I went to basic training and then went to intelligence technical trainings or intelligence tech school. And I, like 1 in 3 women in the military today, was a victim of sexual violence. I say this only because I did what everybody told me to do. I did report it. I reported the incident, but what happened after that was an unintended consequence of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So in the process, the defense attorneys found out I was gay. And in that time, an investigation was started into my life, into discharging me from the military for simply doing the right thing and speaking out. I could not tell the Air Force attorneys that I was gay, and I did not want that. I couldn't tell anyone for that matter. So I had to hire a defense attorney to represent me and ask, what do I need to do? And the only thing that they could tell me was, you have to plead the fifth. So I did. I got on the stand, I pleaded the fifth, and subsequently, he did not face any charges, even though there was a confession, but that's for a different story. And so really, I was very lucky that later on that year, there was many advocates and allies that I am so thankful for today that have stood up and said, Don't Ask, Don't Tell should be repealed. I sometimes get to sit on webinars and look at those people in the eyes and say how much that mattered to me, because they didn't know the little airman that was facing an investigation. But it was repealed, but the unintended consequences of policy always stuck with me. So I finished 6 years of incredible military service. And some of those I was able to be open and honest about my life, and it made me a better soldier, or it made me a better, I'm not a soldier, maybe a better airman, but it made everybody a better soldier, sailor, Marine, airman, and guardian. I like to say that now because the guardians are pretty cool. But it led me to my position today. I never thought I'd be an executive director. I call myself kind of like an accidental advocate. And today we know that there are over 1 million LGBTQ people that are veterans. And we know that there's so many others that are actively serving. And, I stand on the shoulders of some really incredible giants. And I have to shout out to Josh Seafried. He was the founder of OutServe, which was one of our organizations. And he's currently an MBA student at Syracuse. So I just have to make that connection. And I stand on the shoulders of those folks making incredible differences. And we, at the Modern Military, we have 85,000 members and supporters. And every day, it's really exciting to get to see things that happened in the past, because we've been around. LGBTQ service has been around since the Revolutionary War in the history of the United States, and even probably before then. And I'm not going to say probably, because we have been around, whether you know it or not. So I'm just honored to be here, and I've got so much more to say, but I'll let Jessica take the floor next, but I'll turn it back over to you, Maureen.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And I have heard Jennifer speak before, had not heard that part of your story. And I'm struck by that, because among the degrees that you have received, you studied criminal justice, and you received anything but justice, regardless of the fact that it was in a military. So another, as you said, a conversation for us for another day. We're also really thrilled to be joined today by Jessica McGrath, retired Chief Petty Officer from U.S. Navy, currently a systems engineer at Northrop Grumman, and we're proud to say an IVMF 020 alum. Jessica retired with 22 years of naval service. Her career as a cryptologist has spanned almost all facets of the Navy that were open to her. She began at Menwith Hill Station in the UK, served 2 air crew tours totaling 5,000 flight hours on the EP-3E during Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. She obtained her master's training specialist and instructed sailors in their sea school, and trained the Pacific Fleet on staff duty for Carrier Strike Group 15 and as part of the National Reconnaissance Office Detachment. Her awards include the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal, 5 Strike Flight Awards, and the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with V for Valor. In 2016, Jessica was among the first sailors to begin transition after the repeal of the transgender ban, and was the first chief to begin the process on active duty. She shares that she spent over 30 years denying and being denied who she was, and now chooses to live each day loudly and proudly. Jessica has volunteered with LGBT support groups and veterans groups supporting LGBT veterans. As mentioned, she currently works at Northrop Grumman in Manhattan Beach as a senior principal systems engineer for Strategic Space Systems Division. Jessica, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Might you share with us a bit more about your personal story?
Thanks for having me here, Maureen, and hearing Jennifer's story was amazing. A lot of that, rang true for me as well. I think that, not just the military, but also societally for transgender people. The recent years have been kind of a sea change. As we say in the Navy, the direction of the sea and the state of it is amazingly changed. And we still have a ways to go. But when I grew up in the pre-2000s, the landscape was, if you saw a transgender person in the media, typically it was an expose about how odd their life was, or they were queer coded as a villain in media, or they were used as a punchline. So it wasn't really something that I allowed myself to consider, even as a young child, I knew that even if I didn't have a name for it, who I was and that I was a woman. And it's a thing that I carried on through adulthood into joining the Navy. So, fast forward to 97, I joined the Navy, had an amazing career. But as I increased through the ranks to Chief Petty Officer, one of the things we do is we take care of sailors. We enforce the standards, of course, but you consider the sailors, you consider the Navy, and you try to take care of the sailors. And I knew I had sailors that are gay. I knew I was transgender. I knew I was a lesbian. And I knew I couldn't do anything for sailors like me because of the regulations. And in 2008, I was underway on USS Carl Vinson. And we got the word that it was official, that everything was changing, that data was being repealed. And we had to have these big organizational meetings where the admirals and the captains would talk to all the sailors about what the new policy was and how the expectations were. And there was a lot of people that were they had an issue with it, and they expressed it, but they were shouted down pretty quickly. The military, the one thing that has going for it is when the regulation and the direction changes, we all go in that direction. Society at large, unfortunately, is not as direct as the military. But even then, we both have room to grow. So it's being able to be me and actually transition while in the Navy in 2016. That was an amazing start to what I feel is my actual life. Not to discount anything that I did before it, but I feel that before that, I really wasn't living. I really wasn't being who I am and free to be me. And a lot of us that are transgender go through that. What I will say is I'm not an LGBT expert. I am an expert in being me. So everything that we talk about today, I will try to talk about through the lens of my experiences, but where I can make generalizations, I will about. Sorry, we're getting someone else's call here. Where I'll try to make generalizations or tell you about other people's experiences that relate. But every single last one of us are different. Just like everybody dialing into this is different from the person next to them. We're all the same. Either we're Americans or we're from a particular culture. We have similarities like that, but even people in a particular culture have differences between them. That it's amazing. It's diversity. It's how we grow and we learn from each other. So I hope this helps some folks understand today.
Jessica, thank you very much. And I should have said at the start, if you have questions, please add them to the Q&A section. But you actually make the point of how we thought about comprising this panel or this group for this conversation today. We do have someone like Jennifer who is an expert, who is there advocating on behalf of the million+ veterans and members of the organization that she leads. But we agree that getting the personal story like the one that you have to share is also very important, because everyone does have a personal story. And I do want to just, I just was checking the chat, and it sort of goes to the first question before we get into some of the policy issues we wanted to talk about. But I'll go to you, Jessica, first, and then to Jennifer on the policy side. But you started to talk about your transition while still in the Navy in 2016, when the policy was just changed and what that meant. And so I'm interested to hear a little bit more about that actual experience and the support you did or didn't get, both in your service branch, but then as you came out on the other side and into the VA.
Absolutely. So I kind of had, I call it my epiphany moment, but my moment of, I'm not putting up with this anymore. Unfortunately, it was well before the trans ban was lifted. But in about 2015, I found a group called Sparta, which is a support group for, I know Jennifer is very aware of it. It's a support group and a advocacy group that was really working sometimes behind the scenes, but also sometimes in front of the scenes to change the policy and to get the administration to change it. We have a lot of people that have in that group that have testified in front of Congress and that do a lot of advocacy. It's a really great group. Another one is TAVA, which is the Transgender Association for Transgender American Veterans Association, I think is the correct way around for that. But both of those did a lot of advocacy, and I know Modern Military did as well. But Sparta is also a support group. So fortunately, outside of the military, I had a support group. I knew I really couldn't talk to anyone inside the military. About the time that it came out, so I was already a chief petty officer. And one of the things we go through is we actually call it transition or initiation, depending on what year it was. I was initiated, but we've also called it transition. And part of that process is just kind of breaking down the barriers and getting used to speaking in front of people and just networking and talking to people. So I kind of already had a baseline of who I thought I could talk to when the time was right. I reached out to my congressman and actually talked to their office about it, and I was put in contact with the Veterans Affairs person who said they were working on it. And the day that it was announced, about 2 hours before, I got an embargoed copy of the announcement that I still have it. I should probably frame it. That was basically the announcement saying that it was about to be repealed. I was at a command picnic, so the whole command was there. I was helping out with some of the grilling, and I turned to my CMC, who I'd already talked to about 2 months before when the rumblings had kind of started that it was going to change. And he was fortunately very supportive, Command Master Chief for those not in the Navy. And he turned to me and, we just did a fist bump and then went back to, grilling and supporting the families at the command. And that was fantastic because it was just like another day. Unfortunately, the process and everything took, I don't know, another 6 months to stop, being, mildly set jello into something that was actually policy and that we could act upon. But at that point, I'd already been talking to Navy Medicine, and I'd been, getting, all the what I thought were going to be the hoops sorted. But it took a lot more legwork on my part to do that than it does now. Fortunately, the policy is a lot more set, and it's a lot more clear on how to get everything done, and it's a lot more streamlined than it was in those first early 2 years. I was pretty fortunate in that most of the people that I dealt with and that I came out to, I'd say 90% of them were very supportive. A couple, just blew me off or whatever. But I didn't really have any hateful comments or actions or that type of thing. I was in a different situation than a lot of people because I was senior. And being senior and a chief petty officer and having been in the jobs that I've been in with all the responsibilities, I'd already proven myself, technically and leadership wise. So it was less of an uphill battle for me. Some of the other junior sailors, not so much. They struggled with, being taken off a ship because suddenly they couldn't be deployed because the medical officer or the flight surgeon said, well, we just don't know and we're not going to do it. And policy says we should probably take you off. It's not really the right answer. I mean, it's not necessarily the wrong answer. It's just an answer in the face of not having the right information. So I think we're in a much better place now, but we still have a ways to go.
Thank you for that. And Jennifer, that's where I want to pick up. So we're in, as Jessica just said, we're in a much better place today. So talk to us a little bit about what you see the VA, the things, the services, the care, what's going right now.
Yeah, so I did want to make a note that, don't ask, don't tell whenever it was repealed, it only covered lesbian, gay, and bisexual folks. It's only been recently that transgender folks were able to openly serve. So that's super important to know, because there has been a lot of transphobia that does exist. And, that's something that needs to definitely be known, that, there was a repeal a couple years ago, then a tweet happened, and then they were like, well, you need to either come out or go in the closet. So a lot of trauma that exists within that. But within the VA, I think, especially with this administration change, we've seen a lot more focus on transgender veterans. One of the biggest things is we asked for day one that the trans ban would be repealed for both service members and also for veterans, like especially the surgery ban. And I just want to note for folks that may be curious, because one of the common misconceptions is that trans healthcare is very costly. So I want to make it known that the DoD pays 5 times the amount of money on Viagra than it does on trans healthcare. And additionally, the DoD is the #1 employer of trans folks in the military. And additionally, trans folks are 2.5 times more likely to serve than their cisgender counterparts. So saying all that to say is, what is the VA doing? So doing some really great things. So we know that the secretary has done wonderful strides, and they've repealed the ban on surgeries. However, that's not the biggest fix quite yet. We know that there's a legislative battle that we have to fight to make sure this is codified into law, that we are making sure that healthcare is given to all service members, including those that are trans folks. And so there is some progress to be made, and we don't know, whether surgery will be accessible in 2 months or in 2 years. So there's a lot that needs to happen there. But one of the things we are asking the VA to consider is that at every VA clinic, there is an LGBTQ care coordinator. But what this really looks like is that this is basically an additional duty. We only have one LGBTQ coordinator that's full-time at a VA, and she is a wonderful, wonderful person. Her name is Dr. Tiffany Lang. She is probably the most brilliant person you'll ever meet, that deals with transgender military service and veterans issues. But she works at Hampton Roads, and she's the only full-time LGBTQ care coordinator. So when we're looking at that, we're saying, we need to be recognized. And you can go, Jessica, if you want to talk. I didn't know if you had anything to add. And we need to make sure that, that we're creating a culture that's, welcoming and that's welcoming. And there's things that we really do have to improve on. Not only is it, not every trans person wants to get surgery. That's just a misnomer. Some people do, and they want to make sure that that healthcare is guaranteed to them, and they served. And if we are treating for the holistic care of trans service members, they should have the ability as veterans to get the healthcare they deserve and they need, especially, whenever we've pushed them aside for so long. So the VA is doing really great things, and we're only getting started, that's for sure, because the VA secretary has a long list of priorities, and this is just the first one that's coming out. And we're seeing for the first time it's kind of happening behind the scenes, and they're doing really great work, making sure the culture is set, the statutory elements are put in place. And on both sides, that's the case. We're just seeing the VA move a lot faster, which is really exciting to see.
Jennifer, let me ask you, someone has referenced some rule numbers in the chat, and 1340 and 1341 sub 2 for LGBTQ. I'm not familiar with them, unfortunately, but is there something you can share about that?
Give me 1 second. I mean, we've come out with so many new directives. Even like yesterday was the Army, or a couple of days ago, the Army came out with new directives. But let me look real quick. Okay, just the LGBTQ care. Yep. So that addresses the LGBTQ care coordinators. One of the things too is the VA needs to make more progress on not only transgender folks, but also on intersex folks. This is a conversation that must be had. Not only intersex, but opening up the door to understanding non-binary, gender non-conforming, and gender diverse. We're getting into a point where there was a study that came out last week that Over 1 million folks in the United States, I believe it's United States, identify as non-binary. And some folks, like, it just blows their mind about what that means. But although I present as a female, I myself identify more as a non-binary folk. And that means different things to different people. But for me, it means that, for me, that's, I don't ascribe to the societal norms of what a female needs to be in the United States. And there's many things that many interpretations that different people have, but for me, that's what it means to me. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on those things, but there is things that are happening. One thing that we do know is we are working with Cerner, and if anybody knows who Cerner is, they're the new healthcare records management system that are working to implement the new, it's called the Genesis healthcare records management. I'm probably going to get this wrong. But we really sat down with them and said, hey, Cerner, what can you do to ensure that, we're getting the quality of care that's needed for all folks, but specifically trans folks? And what we found is that from Dr. Tiffany Lang and other experts in the field, they said what's happening is that whenever somebody transitions and changes gender or changes their sex marker, that the preventative healthcare markers are taken off the record. And so maybe you were biologically a female, but you transitioned to be a male, you lose all those female indicators. But what we know that we need to make sure that we're checking for breast exams, we're checking, things. And so we were able to go in and talk to them and say, make sure that you're putting both and making sure that TRICARE doesn't deny you, or whomever takes over the service, in the VA, doesn't deny you service because you may look like on paper that you are a male, but you need a breast exam. So making sure that we're doing inclusive care, specifically in healthcare, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those folks. Because if we can make sure that we decrease health disparities, everyone gets the best care they can. And at the VA, they want healthcare provided for all veterans. And this is just another way that we can do that.
Thank you very much for that. I wanted to just talk a little bit about more about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the discharges that resulted from that. That number is really staggering when you think about it, more than 114,000. What is it that we need to do to be more helpful in that regard with respect to the Don't Ask, Don't Tell discharges, those other than honorable discharges?
So I'll take that one, and then Jessica, if you want to jump into one of the biggest things is we would love, at least for me, at least I would love to have a public apology from the White House. That'd be like a first step, or a public apology from anyone, really, to say like our service mattered, because for a long time we even put, during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we put people in prison. We did so many things. I get emails every single day from veterans that tell me this basically ruined my life. And it's hard to see that, to have that 70-year-olds email me and say, this stuck with me forever. But what we need to do, like strategically, like I wish I could go back and heal all the like, because I'm such a caregiver of sort, but we need to make sure that, the administration, if I had a magic wand, it would be just going back and saying all those folks that were discharged honorably under the code of an auspice of homosexual conduct, those should be automatically upgraded. So fighting for legislation. But in the interim, since we can't do that all the time, hopefully we will legislatively, there is an ability to upgrade those discharges. And there's great nonprofits like ours and others like Swords to Plowshares that actually do those upgrades for pro bono. Each discharge, it costs about $5,000 to $10,000 for the legal services. So we do that and make sure, but the process isn't simple. The process takes about 2.5 years at minimum. And that's a lot of trauma that somebody has to endure. And it's making sure that we're culturally competent and saying, these are the things that need to be done, and upgrading those discharges. Because there's other factors that sometimes folks have other issues that are put on their DD-214 that don't always say homosexual conduct. So it's figuring out those gaps and figuring out legislation. So really just basically getting an attorney, putting in the paperwork and upgrading those discharges, because we don't know who these folks are. I have FOIA requested it, but because we don't know those people, it's hard. So we have to go one by one and hope that they reach back out and ask us for help. But what this also looks like is that they, because of the discharge status, they can't get access to VA healthcare, home loans, burial benefits. And so, especially since this is this may have a higher education audience as well, it's really important to know that whenever you put up things like scholarship opportunities or programmatic opportunities for veterans and putting that they have to have an honorable discharge, this also takes away from those folks that served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell that were given dishonorable discharges. So we're totally, completely cutting off opportunities for them in sectors that, that go beyond the VA healthcare, but that go into things, into real life. What does this look like on job applications when you are asked, were you discharged dishonorably? And it's just a stigma that keeps on coming up, and basically that somebody has to come out over and over and over again because their DD 214 says homosexual conduct. And this also, one more thing before I turn it over, but this also did not occur just for dishonorable discharges. Sometimes people had honorable discharges, but they said that the reason for discharge was homosexual conduct. And so those still exist too. And that needs to be really mediated and taken off their records.
Just keep talking about, you said earlier on about all of the unintended consequences, and to your point, some of these things are continuing to live on. Jessica, I wanted to bring you into this conversation under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and someone has asked in the Q&A about the post-traumatic stress associated with the treatment that folks received, the phrase here, and I think someone used it, the witch hunts, under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And, could you talk a little bit about that in terms of that post-traumatic stress, the treatment associated with that, where you found the supportive networks to live who you are, as you said now?
Right. So fortunately, I don't experience PTSD, although I've got a bunch of friends who do. And, I have experienced stress and depression and a few other things because of kind of those policies and some of the situations, the restrictive environment that I found myself in. But, it's challenging because you internalize a lot of it. So you take a lot of it and it's a regulation or it's something you can't change, and it's an externality, but it's hard to disentangle that from who you are and who you feel that you should be able to be. I think for a lot of cisgender people, for a lot of straight people, they always try to say, if it's a man, they say, well, I could, never imagine myself as a woman. Don't try that. Instead, imagine yourself, if you're a man, imagine yourself as a man, but everyone's treating you like a woman. If you're a woman, imagine yourself as a woman, but everyone's treating you like a man. If it's happening not only where you work, but also where you live, where you shop, where you exist in society, and then you try to go for healthcare. And so for me, for example, I had some gallbladder issues. I now got rid of that organ; it's useless for me. But one of the things they did that delayed my transition was we stopped HRT, and we stopped it for a period of about 1.5 years, because I had what's generally referred to as trans broken arm syndrome, which is you walk into the ER, you have a clearly broken arm, and they say, well, it's because you're transgender that you're in pain. This type of thing happens in the medical community. This type of things happens in healthcare. There's, a lot of things that happen that you kind of just take on board and you deal with. And especially those in education and employment, we're fighting a transition that is sometimes forced upon us because of the state that we're living in has extra regulations, or there's a lack of care, there's a lack of insurance, there's a lack of various services that other people take for granted. And all of those are additional stressors that, just pile on. So I've been pretty fortunate in what I've experienced, but I have lots of friends who have experienced a lot worse than I have, and have experienced all of those things and more.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of discussion in the Q&A, Jennifer, about safety within the VA. And as folks from the LGBTQ plus community seek medical services in the event that they're qualified for them, and I think Jessica just sort of referred to that about sort of the discrimination or the challenges that they feel. And you talked about the good things that are happening within the VA, but we also know that there are thousands of VA facilities across the country. Folks are going to different places to get their treatment. What are you seeing in terms of that permeation of culture about safety for anyone who goes into the VA facilities for their healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a big issue. It's a big women's issue, feeling safe in the VA. And then, for me, then you add the complexities. I want to also preface this conversation as definitely I'm a white woman of privilege and I pass as straight. So I gotta just say that whenever I talk about this. But, the VA, I think that it's an ecosystem and it's evolving, and, we have to evolve with it, and it's not going to be perfect. And until we can get some more solid plans, like having an LGBTQ care coordinator that's full-time at each facility, it makes it really difficult for languages to translate to different places. And so I think that, you reach out to the, and I know that also that I think there's only one or two staffing the big LGBTQ VA portion. And so it's basically putting money and resources toward that. Is it going to be perfect? No. Are we trying really hard? Absolutely we are. And, I wish I could have an answer to feel safe, but like our organization provides cultural competency trainings it's called Rainbow Shield. And so we do that. It's a training that we give anyone that wants to take it, but specifically care coordinators, like in general, or people that are working with LGBTQ veterans in the intersection between those two areas. But, how you can feel safe. Wear a lanyard that is a rainbow flag. Signal, put your, I'm not very good at it, but sometimes when you put your pronouns on your email, it's just a signal. If it's just signaling the safety, but it's like, talk about that it's being a safe space, put literature out that highlights, the experiences of all veterans. And if, and that's just that's like just a common practice for inviting anyone and feeling safe. I think it's, even for me, I don't not feel safe, but I also don't feel welcomed. And that's, for me, it's kind of different. But, for me, it's also like having space and asking those cultural competent questions. Instead of asking me if I have a husband, just ask if I have a spouse or a partner. It's those little things that you can do and just not assume. So the assumption, it's the little things that matter, and that the little things become big things. So and if, as far as resources, the VA, it's got a long way to go. Honestly, but they're trying really, really hard, I think, and it's not going to be perfect anytime soon. But, just on my end, I'm trying to make sure that these folks are given the right information and given, and I know that, sometimes these directives come down and you're like, what do I do? Make sure you advocate and ask questions and push them. And if you push them more, each state has its own medical director. So push them even more to get the care you need, because it's out there and it is available. But sometimes people just don't know where to go, or sometimes they don't have the right information. And sometimes you have to be your own self-advocate, which is not the easiest answer. That's not the right answer to say. That's probably not the best answer for me to give you, but it's true. You are in charge of, making sure that your healthcare is taken care of, and we can try as hard as we can as a nonprofit partner. But I just know that it's getting better. And I say that with all my heart. I wouldn't lie to you. I wouldn't lie here. I would just say really like it is getting better. I've seen it get better over the last administration change.
Thank you for that. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the Equality Act. Jennifer, if you could share a little bit about why that's important right now. We know that it's passed the House and hopeful for the Senate. So just if you could talk a little bit about that and why it's important for, when you just mentioned the words advocacy and pushing, advocacy we need to do in a whole bunch of different ways. And in front of our legislature is one of them.
Yeah, Jessica, do you want to start and then I'll add on to that? Because I have a lot to say about this, so I want to give you space.
Sure, no, I'm sure much more well informed because you're involved in the fight. But I think the thing that's important for the Equality Act is just that I've moved around a lot in the country. I've experienced nearly every part of it, and what I will say is that there are parts of the country I feel safe in. There are parts of the country where I feel I can get medical care, that I can get employment. There are parts of the country that I dare not go. I have a friend who just moved to Florida, and I will never move back there just because I'm not convinced that my civil liberties would be taken care of. So things like the Equality Act and making it standard across the country, I think are incredibly important. We look at the military, and one of the things that I think we're good at is that we're equal and we're fair when we can be. Sometimes we're limited by regulation, like that data that we finally got rid of and the trans ban that we finally got rid of. And we do have other ways that the military needs to improve, but by and large, we're fair. It's a meritocracy. It's, everything is based on what you bring, and you're given the tools to succeed. But in so many parts of this country, people aren't given the tools to succeed. So I think that's, really what Jennifer and the others are fighting for.
Yeah, so to give you just more of an overview of the Equality Act is basically just this bill that says, if you're LGBTQ, you get the same rights as everyone else. Basically, like in layman's terms, that's exactly what it is. It's saying that, I can't get fired from my job just for being gay, which I currently reside in a state that I do. I can get fired. It also means that I have fair protections and that have to do with housing. And it also means that, that I can't be discriminated against for most reasons. And it's not giving extra protections or extra rights for LGBTQ folks. It's basically just saying, we want to have the same abilities as you have as a straight person or a heterosexual person, and just live who we are. This year, over 100 state bills were introduced against the transgender community. Over 100. This is not acceptable. We cannot deny folks basic health care. We cannot do that. And so this Equality Act would ensure that. So what can you do as a person? You can definitely write your state representative. You can write your federal representative. And guess what? I would actually call them, because they actually make tally marks about when you call and just say, hey, my name is Jennifer Dane. I'm calling from Arizona, and I want my representative, Senator Sinema, to support the Equality Act. Boom, done. That's really the script. And they will say, thank you for calling. And they will put you down as a check mark. But I want to tell you something that you can do even just as a private citizen that goes beyond the Equality Act. Because whether it gets passed or not, it's important that you keep advocating for your rights, to your passions. So what I want to tell you is that, regardless if it's advocacy for the LGBTQ community or wherever you stand, it's really important that every day you advocate with your money. You vote, I call it voting with your money. And you go to businesses that you are a patron of businesses that support initiatives that you care about. So there's this wonderful fast food chicken place that has great waffle fries and wonderful lemonade, but I don't go there. Why? Because they support anti-LGBTQ initiatives. And I do that strategically because I make sure that I am doing what's right for my life. And if you like their causes, go there, support them. But because that's really important. There's a website called opensecrets.org that shares public profiles of corporations and where they're spending their money. Whether that's looking at your cell phone provider to say, oh, who did you support and congressionally, or are there issues that they supported that I don't want to go to? Just overall, like if there is an issue that you're passionate about, whether that be families, whether that be LGBTQ rights, whether that be, environmentalism, go to these websites and make decisions about your money, because those decisions turn into votes, turn into people's lives, and turn into like life-saving measures for folks or not. So that's really critical that if you take anything from this, you make sure that you as a citizen have the right to change people's lives simply to the money that you spend every single day.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. That was one of my favorite lines in the last conversation that you did for our team about voting with your money, and we've shared that repeatedly. Someone asked in the chat, Jennifer, and you might know this a little bit more so than Jessica, and you and I have had this conversation. Talk to us a little bit about all the research that's been done about this community.
Well, spoiler alert, there's like none. So the interesting thing is, don't ask, don't tell. Another unintended consequence was that because of the provisions, because of like in hiding or not asking, they simply didn't ask. So we're coming into 10 years after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell with very little data. So there has to be an approval from the Assistant Secretary of there's got to be, I'm gonna get this wrong, so I'm just gonna say there's gotta be a high level approval to get data collected, especially on the DoD side. So it is my goal to make sure that we include gender identity and sexual orientation in our next even climate surveys or any surveys that we provide. And also for me, I'm getting my PhD. One of the things I'm exploring in my PhD is really exploring the harms of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and making sure that we can get some really quality research to say, what this really means. Because one of the questions I got asked not too long ago, I was on a call, and they said, well, how can the transition program from the military to the VA be improved? And I had to sit back. There's many things I can say because there's research that's been collected on that. But I can say, if we don't even know who these people are that are LGBTQ, how can we make policies for individuals that we have no idea who are coming out? So we have to bridge that gap. So to get better, we have to have that research, we have to have that data, and we've got to use it in ethical ways that are ethically driven and full of trust. So as an institution, we've got to make sure that we're getting the trust factor, that we're having allyship, because there's a lot of folks that are very reluctant to share their information. Especially, as we told the trans community, the trans military community, come out, it'll be easy. And then we said, oh, just kidding, go back in the closet or be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So I said that in jest, but it's actually very, very traumatic and something that we don't need to do. So we need to do it ethically and making sure that data is collected and used in ways that are very, very truth-telling and intentional. And I say this not only for the LGBTQ community, because there are other communities, especially racial and ethnic minorities, that also have no data collected on them in ways it's almost like we finally had a light bulb moment that said, oh, we need to care about these communities. Absolutely. We've needed to care about them for a long time. But we really have to look at what I talk about, like the Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality, and really looking at the intersections of life for military members and veterans and how those intersect and have layers on one another. So saying all that to say is there's zero data.
No, really appreciate that. And as someone, and again, someone who's still learning so much, I think that we think about, I know we've been asked recently, for example, on a whole series of grant applications about those that we serve through our programs, and we're serving 20,000 plus a year. Do we know gender identification of those that we serve? And, initially we're like, oh, can we ask that question? And you've just made me think a little bit differently about that. And Jessica, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that for an organization like the IVMF or other veteran serving organizations out there who are wondering about asking that question, what your personal experience is as you've gone through that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as we said in the Navy, the bluff is the bottom line up front is just to ask. You know, maybe don't make it a mandatory field, you know, in your questionnaires, but if you were to ask, then you have the data. So one of the actually 2 tours in a row, I was command manage equal opportunity representative in 2 different commands. And what that means is we do surveys and we collect data and we try to find where the command is doing well and where it's not. And we have to collect the demographic data and compare it and see, you know, are women having different problems than men are, you know, blacks or other races having different problems, or is there a, you know, religious problem at the command? You know, we have the protected categories, and now we have gender identity as well as a protected category. But if you don't have the data, you know, as an engineer, if you don't have the data, you can't make a decision. You know, if I don't have, you know, the limits of what the cost and what the expectations are, I can't design you a system. So, but I also can't tell you if the system is functioning correctly or not. So I would say, yeah, ask the question, and then you'll have data, and then you'll be able to act on it.
Thank you for that. It is hard to believe, but we are almost at the top of the hour. I am most grateful to Jennifer and to Jessica for your time and your insights today. As someone said in the chat, when are we going to do another one of these? And Jennifer, I'm going to conclude with what you stated at the top, which is while June may be Pride Month, you wear pride every single day. And so we do have to make these conversations more regular conversations, not just those conversations that happen once a month when the calendar says that we should be recognizing that. So to everyone who joined us today, I thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your interest. Please reach out to us with other questions, comments, issues. Know that we will be asking those questions. And again, to Jennifer and to Jessica, thank you very much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.